Welcome to One for the Money, the weekly talk show with interviews you can use. I'm national financial columnist and talk show host, Steve Savant. And on today's show, long-term care. We all know we're going to be living longer, and the baby boom generation may cross new frontiers in human longevity. But if we're going to be living longer, then we're going to need long-term care. Most seniors spend $250,000 for long-term care, and that's real money. So to help us understand our future about long-term care needs and how to plan for our senior retirement years, this week's special guest, nationally recognized long-term care authority and syndicated columnist, Stephen Foreman, all here on One for the Money. Well, welcome to the show, Stephen.
Hi, Steve.
Welcome, and I have to tell you, we look at so many things that are happening today in retirement.
Sure.
And one of the things that are in retirement right now is, how long am I going to live, and what kind of long-term care am I going to need? And a lot of people are saying, oh, I'm not worried about that anymore. Obamacare is going to take that.
Not true.
Not true. And then some people say, well, no problem. Medicaid's going to take care of that.
Not a good solution.
Not a good solution. It could happen, but it's not a good solution.
Yeah, there are better solutions.
There's better solutions. I've noticed that I just came off one of the mortality tables measuring how long people are living. I mean, Willard Scott says happy birthday to a handful of Americans that turn 100 every day, and if he took the time to say happy birthday, it would take him 90 minutes a day, 365 days a year for people turning 100. So we're going to be living a long time.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's funny you would mention that. I think he actually stopped doing the happy birthdays because it was taking too long. Yeah, the centenarians are becoming, the oldest old are one of the fastest growing demographics. So
we're going to be around for a little while, and
Absolutely.
I noticed a stat. I was looking at some long-term care stats. People were saying the average mortality into the early 90s for boomers, and that's what we're starting to look at now. We're starting to look at that.
Sure.
Non-smokers, of course, decent health, things of that nature. But when we look at that, we're looking at maybe laying out almost $250,000 out of pocket, and that seems to be the average, not the best, the most, but actually $250,000.
yeah, you know, and some of these retirement surveys, you have to be careful because some of them do not even include the cost of extended care. So be careful what you look at. But in the past, we used to be looking at people retiring at 65. That would be when they were looking at Medicare and thinking about retirement plans. And now we're looking at people working longer and retiring with not just 20 years ahead of them, but people that have to consider 20, 30, 40 years of retirement and a serious concern about not outliving their money. And so this is, you know, extended care is a real serious concern.
Well, I'm looking at where money comes from when people actually have to pay out medical bills, pay out long-term care. I'm looking at some of this, and the number one place where most Americans do this, it comes from their savings accounts. So 75% of all that is coming directly out of pocket. And by the way, remember, they pay taxes on this already. So it's the net amount that we're talking about. Social Security is a second largest area where we have money to pay for long-term care, kind of convalescent care, all these things. This is coming out of actual my pocketbook, our Social Security, and then another one. You said, we mentioned Medicare. It's not the best choice. It could happen, it could help, but it's not really the best choice. Talk about why that's such an issue.
Right. Well, let's clarify. There's actually Medicare and Medicaid, as I'm sure you know, but I want to make sure that our listeners understand as well. Medicare is a program that it consists of Part A and Part B, and Part D is the drug program. Now that's something we are pretty much all going to get when we turn 65 if you've paid payroll taxes. Medicare primarily is a program that pays for doctor, hospital, but it doesn't pay for custodial care at home, which is the kind of care that most of us need as extended care. Medicaid is the program for primarily those of us who have who are indigent. It's a medical program for the impoverished. Now you might say to yourself, that's not something that you would consider yourself being if you're a successful person, and yet it pays about 9 out of 10 of all nursing home days. So it is primarily the largest payer of extended care costs in the country.
When I look at this, it looks like only 40% of the country at retirement has some form of long-term care benefit. This is a low number.
Actually, well, you know, and there's some dispute about you know, what the penetration rate of long-term care insurance is. Some statistics say that the penetration rate is maybe 9 or 10%. If you ask Americans whether they own long-term care insurance, sometimes you'll see people reporting 15 to 20%, which suggests that people think they have the product and they don't actually have the product. And then other surveys suggest that it might be as high as 50%, and we get those numbers when we consider the actual market for long-term care, which may be the actual market when we consider who can health qualify, who has the finances, who's in the right age demographic. Perhaps the market is only really as large as 15 to 20 million Americans, and when we look at it from that perspective, perhaps penetration rate is as high as 50%.
Well, when I look at some of these other ideas, I mean, think of this, 18% of Americans had to sell their home because they just needed the money for their long-term care expenses.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at 4% declared bankruptcy to pay the bill.
In fact, I'm going to agree with you that medical bankruptcies due to medical circumstances, that is the #1 reason for bankruptcy. There was a cover story on Time within the last month called The Bitter Pill, which is looking at healthcare costs in America, which did suggest that medical reasons are the #1 reason for bankruptcy. But I'm glad you mentioned homes, because our homes, our equity in our homes is the #1 source where we are keeping our assets. And that plays into Medicaid, because I think the median home value of a home in America is somewhere between about $180,000 to $230,000.
Yeah, when I think about our home paying the bill, it's going to be that's going to be tough. People are trying to do reverse mortgages just for income.
Yes.
So when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about some of these stats and give you some of the basics of long-term care.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
You know, living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back to our second segment, 2 for the show. And of course, we're with substantial authority on long-term care, Stephen Foreman. Stephen, we're talking about our homes. I mean, this is the #1 asset in America. I don't want to do anything wrong that I shouldn't be doing. Talk a little bit about this, because we're looking at people having to sell their homes to pay for their long-term care.
Well, right. What I wanted to talk about with the homes is it's the #1 asset that most of us have, and if you consider that the median home value of a home in America is between about $180,000 to $230,000, let's compare that with Medicaid. Now, Medicaid, the home equity exemption in order to qualify for Medicaid is $500,000 in almost all states. In some states, it's as high as $750,000. Now, this presents an actual problem, because with Medicaid's exemption at $500,000, it actually means that most of our homes are not at risk in order to qualify for Medicaid. And with nothing real at risk, it means that most people do not plan. With nothing at risk, we fail to plan. When we fail to plan, we plan to fail. And that's why so many people tend to put off, delay, postpone an actual viable plan for long-term care.
And when that happens, here's the #1 phobia for seniors in LTC. They say they don't want to be a burden to their family.
Absolutely true. They don't want to be a burden to their family. At the same time, they're afraid of not outliving their assets. So this kind of presents a conundrum. They say, I don't want to outlive my assets, which says to you, I'm planning on living a long life. But at the same time, if someone says to you, Steve, I'm planning on living a long life, we have to accept something. I'm planning on living a long life. If you plan to live a long life, is it possible you might get frail? If it's possible you might get frail, then is it possible you may need extended care? It is. So, if you need extended care, do you know what extended care is? I might ask someone.
Yeah, you know what, Steve? I don't think people know this. I mean, when we think of long-term care, I think nursing home.
Right.
That's all I think.
No, it's not. So, extended care, I want to think about it in a different way. Nursing home, it's not nursing homes, it's not a place, it's not a location, it's not a kind of care. Extended care instead is a life-changing event. I want to think about it in a new term. But let's get away from long-term care because the term is kind of confounded now with ideas that people have. It's a bad connotation. Instead, extended care is a life-changing event that can have catastrophic consequences for your wife or your family and your ability to maintain your financial commitments in retirement. We're going to start thinking about it in that regard.
Well, when I look at it, I mean, I've heard phrases like this is assisted living. There's home care.
Yes.
There's nursing home care.
Yes.
There's adult daycare.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about the kind of this is the quilt. You know,
Yes.
these are the patches that we make this big quilt on because it falls under long-term care.
Yes, these are all locations where one could receive care, but primarily the damage is done at home. Because nursing home, assisted living, these are all places, infrastructures where care can be provided. But somebody that the care recipient, that's not where the damage is. The damage is felt around that person by the caregivers. Caregiving can cause the caregiver to become chronically ill. With all respect, if something happens to me, my life doesn't end. Life ends for the people around me. My wife could become chronically ill taking care of me. My son or daughter may have to quit their job, drop everything, and not be able to take care of their financial commitments to take care of me. So too often we focus on the person, on the primary earner, but in fact, it has a ripple effect on those around them. So it's not so much where care can be received as it is the consequences, both financial, emotional, and physical, on those around somebody.
Now, when we're looking at this, I mean, because people are going to hear this show and they respond heavily to Medicare, Social Security. This is just another piece of senior living that we need to really accommodate in our thinking. So when I'm looking at all these things you just said, I'm like, well, I thought my long-term care insurance was just to take care of that issue, but it sounds like it's way broader than that from your point of view.
Yes, it's actually something. Long-term care insurance, extended care insurance, is designed to bring the family, is designed to make them whole and to bring them back to a state before the extended care event occurred. You know, too often financial planners tend to work on an asset and income portfolio and fail to move to the next step, which is asset and income protection portfolio. So that's...
Now, my mind would think, why would that not be in reverse? Why wouldn't you be doing defensive planning first before you would do any kind of asset building or growth or income?
Well, I should hope that more planners do that. But according to the statistics that we find, a lot of CFPs, financial advisors, are simply not comfortable bringing up these kinds of questions too often because, as you know, long-term care insurance is medically underwritten, and that's kind of there's a disconnect. They're not comfortable asking these kinds of questions with their clients, which is why we find that a lot of advisors tend to partner with a long-term care expert.
Well, when I think about it, this is what we're planning. It's part of senior living. We have to incorporate this. If you're really a planner out there, you need to be thinking about long-term care. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about some of the costs. Should I do indemnification or reimbursement? All these things we're going to talk about right after the break with Steve Foreman.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
You know, living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. spouses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We're with Steve Foreman. We're talking about long-term care. Steve, I'm looking at this. It says the odds are that you'll need long-term care. It says 70% of Americans. Now, I'm thinking about the graying of America. Sure. And I mean, actually, the world is just getting older, but America is really, half the population is going to be 50 and over here in a couple of years.
Right, right. You know, a lot of people have heard the statistic that I think 10,000 baby boomers are turning 65 every day. So it's also called an age wave or the silver tsunami. And it's, you know, in large part you think it's just something we have to sit back and wait for our phones to ring. But, you know, the caveat is our phones are not ringing. So why is that not occurring? And there's an answer for that, actually. Part of that is because statistics don't sell. So I'm going to explain why that is. It's because when we, and not to, you know, counteract this, but when we go out to our clients and we suggest, well, you know, 1 out of 2 people over 65 is going to need care, people have a tendency to react and say, well, I'll be the 1 out of 2 who doesn't need care. Or we say, you know, 65% of claims are now initiated by women and 70% of claim dollars are by women. People then have a tendency to say, well, I'll be the 30% who doesn't need it. So one of the big transitions we can make now is to move from risk-based selling using statistics and facts, and it's okay, we can go into statistics because they're useful for designing plans, but is to move into consequences-based selling. And that says, even if we allow that this could never happen to you, and I might say, Steve, this is probably never going to happen to you, but what if it did? So we can say, it'll never happen. But if it did, have you considered the consequences it would have on your family and your children to have to take care of you, to have to drop everything if an unexpected care event were to occur to you and have unforeseen consequences on their emotional and physical and financial and your ability to maintain your commitments, your financial commitments in retirement. So we switch to a consequences base.
Well, I'm looking at the consequences now, and I mean, these numbers are staggering to me.
Sure they are.
I'm looking at health care aid, just in a long-term care service. I'm not talking about the Ritz here. I'm talking about average.
Sure.
So I'm looking at 20.20 hours, about $20 an hour.
Right.
Assisted unit is about $3,300 plus per month.
Sounds about
a nursing home's about $195, and a private room could be up to $7,000 a year. I mean, that's serious money.
Yeah.
And this last one here, nursing home with a private room, that number looks like 78 grand. I mean, those numbers are just impossible for me to get my head around.
Yes, and those are right in line with what we're seeing, about 80 to 100 grand a year for nursing home, and maybe half that for assisted living or around-the-clock home care. But I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing we see too often when producers are designing plans, they'll bring up their cost of care maps, and I've got the latest one here from one of the gold standard, and they'll be coming out with their 2013 numbers in about a month. People too often tend to go right to the nursing home numbers and they say, here's the cost of care, and then they design a plan based upon the cost of care in a nursing home. They say it's $80,000 a year, and then they design this Cadillac plan. Here's the reality. 2/3 to 3/4 of claims are initiated in the home, and they never transition out of there. And also people tend to go to assisted living. Now that's where people want to go. And now we just established that that home care and assisted living claims are maybe half of that, about 40 grand a year. So if we know that most people want to receive care in their homes, and claims bear out that they do receive care in their homes, why are we continually as an industry shooting ourselves in the foot by quoting plans based upon care in a nursing home that's twice as much, consequently devising plans that cost an exorbitant amount, and then feeding into the negative stereotype that consumers have that long-term care insurance is too expensive? Instead, we should be devising plans that are based upon care where people intend to receive care in their homes and where they do receive care, and devise plans that are actually affordable.
Do you think there's a difference in the way you've looked at, you know all the plans?
I do.
I'm looking at, is there a difference between, should I look at reimbursement plans over indemnification? What? These are all, there's a lot of questions they always ask, do I want to sit there at the end of every month and hand a bill in to get reimbursed, or do I want to just have an indemnification plan that once I trigger the event, I just have this coming in?
Right, very good question. You know, there are pros and cons to both. The lion's share of products out there right now do operate under the reimbursement scenario. And while it can be spun to say that it's cumbersome. You receive bills, you turn them in. The reality is that some carriers are significantly better at that than others. Some have been doing that process for 30 years, and still they receive very high claim satisfaction surveys, and people are very happy with it, and they do it like clockwork, and they're paying $3 million per day in claims. So it can work.
When we come back, I want to talk about this because it's really, to me, this is an important issue.
Sure it is.
Reimbursement, indemnification. I want to make sure that when we look at a long-term care and we look at the pros and cons, that everybody understands the economic yin and yang of it, because I think this is going to be the play, and will the carrier pay? We'll be right back.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
You know, living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back. Of course, we're talking about long-term care with long-term care expert Stephen Foreman. Stephen, we were talking about it before the break, the reimbursement, and sometimes I go, yeah, because I want to get exactly what I shelled out. I want to get it back in my hand.
Yes.
But sometimes people look at cash indemnification. You know, they just say, I don't want to mess with that.
Right.
And there's good and bad for all this, right?
Well, with true indemnity policies where, you know, if you say I was in the facility for that day, then they just pay you the max amount that you bought. Those indemnity type plans have kind of, we don't see those too many. Those are kind of legacy products. What we do see today are cash. Pure cash, where it's a disability model. As long as you show the carrier that you were disabled, that you triggered the policy, 2 of 6 ADLs or a cognitive impairment, they pay you the cash up front for the month.
And real fast, Stephen, ADLs, because everybody,
Sure.
we use these acronyms in our industry.
Right, maybe
ADLs.
Folks don't know them.
Let's talk real quick. What is an ADL? What is that? What is that
Activities
acronym?
of daily living. Think of these as the kind of things that you do in the morning. You bathe. You get dressed, which means using your zippers, being able to button your buttons. You eat. Can you feed yourself? Bathing activity. Transferring. Can you get from the bed into the bathroom? Toileting. Can you use the facilities? And continence, which is actually, you know, your actual own continence. So these are typically, we think about these as the activities you can perform in the morning just routinely without standby or hands-on assistance. So if you could outperform 2 of 6 ADLs, that is a standard traditional definition that's been around since 1997 from HIPAA.
No, you said a really big question of mine. The issue of definition.
Yes.
Because every carrier seems to have a little bit different take on some of the different. They all agree that 2 out of 6, but
Yes.
do they all agree on the definition of what those are?
You know, I have heard people attempt to make what I would say is a mountain out of a molehill when they say, is it standby or hands-on? Does somebody have to hold your arm to help you, or are they just within arm's reach? My take on this, having looked at the issue from all sides, is that basically they are interpreted. By the time you get past all the language, they are interpreted the same way by and large. That carriers are allowed to, that the language is substitutable at the claims level. That's been my understanding. But I want to get back to the cash thing before we leave. So cash says once you've triggered it, they send you the cash. Now, there are plans that still pay 100% cash. What you bought, you get 100%. The advantage is there's no strings attached. I mean, cash talks. So you are basically at your discretion to spend the money any way you wish. One of the advantages is there's a lot of people traveling who don't know where they may retire. They can go anywhere. It's obviously a worldwide international benefit. There are other plans who combine the reimbursement with the cash. So even if you bought a reimbursement benefit, they may say, here's a rider that says, if you don't want the reimbursement this month, we will give you an alternative in cash for that month. Instead of 100%, you could get up to 100% of the reimbursement. How about 40% of your benefit as a cash alternative for the month? So it's something to look for in policies.
When I'm trying to think about this, and we have many seniors watching our show,
Sure.
I'm looking at the kind of idea of how should I position, I'm getting ready for long-term care. I'm going to go in and look at the market. What's a good contract? What's a good carrier?
Right.
How much will it cost me? And that is the myth. I was surprised. Last year, I decided, hey, it's my time.
Sure.
I just entered my early 60s, and I said, hey, and I was surprised. It was nowhere near the price I thought it was going to be.
No, and we look at statistics on price all the time, and there's a huge range of price. Something could cost as little as $1,500 with one carrier, as much as $3,500 with another. You should not just go with the first price you look. It pays to shop around, or it pays to look at an agency that is able to shop from many carriers.
Well, yeah, let's go down that road, because really this market has been reduced down to about a half a dozen carriers. Really, I mean,
yeah, I think there are about 20 or so carriers, but by and large, about 80% of sales are made by about the top 5 carriers. It's concentrated, and so if you can find an agency, and I always say spend as much time shopping for your agency as you do shopping for your carrier. Does your agency have experience in this business? Have they handled many claims in this business?
How important is it to have experience in this as an agent?
Well, it is, because an agent can be an advocate for you. An agent knows how to read and interpret the policy language, the specimen policies. They're able to help move your policy through underwriting. They're going to be there for you at claim time 30 years from now. If you work with an agency that's only sold 1 or 2 policies a year, will they even still be in the business 30 years from now when you will be there?
Right.
And so I think people tend to spend too much ability looking at a hyper-abbreviated letter grade when that doesn't really tell you much about the service of the carrier.
When I think about long-term care, it's a very important decision.
Sure.
And we want to look through every single carrier. And if you go out to our site, oneforthemoney.tv, and say, Steve, sign up and I need to see this, we'll show you all the carriers that we think are players.
Great ability.
We'll give you the ability to look at this and the way Steve looks at it, because he's a pro. That's all he does. And so when you go out to our site, don't forget to put in and say long-term care info. Remember, long-term care can provide the protection you need during your retirement years, and we partner with financial professionals who know how to protect your lifestyle. For more information on how you can protect your lifestyle during your retirement, just go out to the show's website at www.oneforthemoney.tv. And remember, you can follow me on Twitter and visit me on any of my social media network sites: Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Google+.